How far did you get in Jackal?
Oh, dude, I beat it.
I did too.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't that hard.
No. I sent that picture to you.
Yeah.
That was after I beat the first level.
Right.
And then, you know, how in between levels it shows you moving up the vertical map.
Yep.
Like the first 3 levels felt so quick. It's like, oh, there's no way I'm not going to. I mean, it's not hard.
Right.
I kept that.
The missile.
I kept the missile.
Yeah, so did I.
If I lost that, I would
like, nope, I'm not going through that crap again.
Fuck no grenades. No grenades. I'm not doing the grenades.
Yeah, I was the same way. Until the final level. And that's at that point I built up so many extra lives that I was like that final boss fight.
Oh yeah, no, I gave up. I
was
on
like,
that.
fine.
I said screw it.
I'm like, I got enough lives to just get through this.
I had like 7 or 8 lives, and I just And then when I beat it, I had like 1 left. I almost felt like I shouldn't tell you I beat it because I wouldn't want you to feel like you should beat it too, because you wouldn't want someone to force themselves through that game. I enjoyed it, not from like this is a great game, but the challenge was easy. The levels themselves were different enough in looks.
Yeah.
It didn't do anything new or better than any other games of the time.
Right.
It was just Commando with a tank. Yeah. Or Ikari Warriors with a tank or whatever.
Yeah, it definitely was. It is totally like that, but I feel like it had even less options than those did because you're stuck in the tank. And like you can get into the tanks and the Ikari Warriors. I guess there wasn't really many power-ups in Commando either, but it felt like it needed like some other kind of power-ups or something that you could grab when you're out there. It just felt kind of barren, I guess.
Bare bones is how I was thinking. Exactly. The controls were inoffensive. The tank was a little bit sluggish.
The whole mechanic where you could only shoot your bullets like straight up though is dumb.
That was dumb. Yeah, you could shoot the missiles any direction, but I can't even remember because I never used them except for the first 2 minutes of the game. Could you throw grenades any direction?
Yeah, it was the same as it's the same as missiles.
Yeah, not a lot of upgrades. One thing I did like that I noticed early was because the game reminded me so much of Commando. You know, grenades are limited in Commando. You have to refill those. Granted, I said, it was kind of easy, which it was, but I did appreciate the fact that your secondary weapon was unlimited.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely made it more bearable. That would have been like, I can imagine if I had to use that gun that could only fire straight up and then I had a limited amount of rockets or bullets, that would have been unbearable.
It was like just totally inoffensive, just like.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I kind of enjoyed it for the fact that it was like, oh, this feels like a Nintendo game of that time.
It did. I agree for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Including the Konami box art. I don't know why, but the game's box art itself is much more memorable to me. I mean, it's burned into my brain from Nintendo Power ads.
Box art's awesome, yeah. You know, some of that, the design, kind of aspects of it are what appeal to me the most, right? Just because I'm a sucker for a military Jeep in that era, like Hound or like, the G.I. Joe Jeep was always my favorite little vehicle.
Heck yeah.
So seeing that thing, drive around, it did feel like, it felt like something that I would have enjoyed, the way it looked at the time.
Yeah, agreed. Or as I like, things in black.
Oh, yeah.
The opening cutscene, this mission is going to make your blood boil or something like that. I was like, hell yeah, let's get some 8-bit military cheese. Konami, what's up with Konami circa mid-'80s with their kind of American. I mean, I guess they were just going with Hollywood trends at the time, like Predator and Commando. But you look at Konami's catalog and it's like, and Capcom, another obviously prolific Japanese developer, but it's
all
like
about American
Contra.
military might.
Yeah. It's thinking of Contra and Russian Attack and Commando.
Yeah.
And I know Commando's Capcom, but I mean, there were Ikari Warriors.
It makes me think that they're kind of passively, aggressively, ironically selling it back to us at that time. That idea, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah. So yeah, and inclling like it's always weird.
It's kind of like, oh, this is what you like, huh? Why don't you buy this then? Why don't you buy this?
Yeah,
they're just pushing it at us.
Yeah, we'll just keep shoveling it in your way, and you keep buying it. But like 1942 and 1943 in the Battle for Midway, it's like, here's some of Japan's most humiliating defeats. Here's a Japanese company making mucho money off of making a game off of it.
Well, you know what's funny is that was another one that this game is kind of like too. Is like it's really not the kind of game that I feel like I like. But 1943, I remember, was a NES game that I had at the time, like one of my few when I didn't have very many. It's kind of another vertical shooter where you're in a vehicle. It kind of reminded me of that. But that had more power-ups, and that's kind of what I felt Jackal should have been, right? Where, okay, well, if I'm stuck in a vehicle all the time, I should have like some more crazy power-ups as like a vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, I know you just said it, but I had never assumed that 1943 is a game that you would have even played, much less, I shouldn't say that, but enjoyed or owned.
Yeah, I am too. I don't even know. It's not my kind of game, really. The only reason that I think I wanted it was they always had it at that round table, the one we talked about in the past that used to have the whole arcade room.
Yep.
But then after they lost that and they just had the line of arcade games right outside of that room. 1942, the arcade game was always there. Yeah,
just thinking of that game, top-down military shooter, vertical. That's one of the reasons Jackal's so easy. Is it's not just auto-scrolling. It's like,
right.
The number of enemies is pitiful, and then those enemies on the ground, it's like, oh yeah, I can't shoot my gun at them, but I just run over them, and they rarely shoot at your tank.
Right.
Yeah. I was curious about the 2-player mode on that. I mean, that might
make it better.
Might make it better, but I can't imagine you and I having as much or more fun with that than we did that night playing Ikari Warriors. I mean, Ikari Warriors it's superior.
That first boss, actually, just the statues that are shooting missiles at you.
Yeah.
For some reason, just seems so weird to me, but it's something that I remember wasn't totally uncommon out of games like at that time.
Yeah.
For some reason, like monuments were going to start opening their mouths and shooting missiles at us. Like, was that something that was like going around as like a fear, or how did that become such a
trope?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny because of one of Jackal's weaknesses is the fact that the bosses are so unremarkable. However, that boss you just talked about, I actually had kind of a false hope, like, oh, this might get good, because that boss fight reminded me of Castlevania. I was like, oh, this is Konami here, because those statues, was it 4 heads looking down? They reminded me of Medusa.
Yeah.
And then, like, when you pause the game, it has the same Konami NES jingle, and I was just like, oh, this feels familiar, even though I've never played it. It feels comfortable, but nothing stuck out to me or impressed me after that boss fight.
It's funny you mentioned the sound effect. It's one other thing that just jogged my memory of that I really did like, or at least that really reminded me of the time period, was the red alert sound effect whenever you went to the boss.
Oh yeah,
just the siren came out, and I was like,
that Russian attack.
That's something that we've seen in a lot of video games. It's just like, okay, that means something big's happening here.
Yeah. It's like the kung fu guys turning around abruptly.
You're right. Yeah, it's like a ceremony for the boss fight. That was probably the high point of playing the game, right? So you're like, oh, this looks, this looks unique. This is a kind of cool first boss. Maybe it's just going to get weirder and stranger and more out there than like out, and you even get a cutscene between levels, and you get that big, that whole like, it just looks like it's a page out of a G.I. Joe comic book. That's what's funny, right? It did remind me of that GI Joe, or at least that's what I was. It put me in that mindset of that GI Joe Transformer kind of mindset. But then, I was disappointed because it was not as cool as GI Joe, and the car didn't do anything cool like it would have if it was like a Transformers world.
Yeah.
But if I would have seen this game, I think as a kid, just seen the box or whatever and looked at the poster that was in Nintendo Power or Nintendo Fun Club or whatever was going on at this time, I think I would have thought this was going to be cool, right?
Yeah, I was always under the impression it might be cool.
What does the Jackal advertisement look like? It's probably just the poster, huh?
Oh yeah, I remember that ad. I have that in some kind of magazine. Look at these dudes.
Looks like Will Ferrell over here on the right.
It does kind of look like Will Ferrell.
Who the fuck is that dick nose in the middle?
Is that like their mechanic in the back? Is that the crazy cooter of their group or what? Every kid in the 80s was like, hell yeah.
That guy in the front is so greased up, man. The oiliest person I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Dude, you want to play this game, man.
Hell yeah, you would.
Play that game, you're going to grow up looking like these guys.
Shooting bad guys.
They've got the power. You've got the control.
Do the math. That means that you've got the power.
Oh, this is a Jackal and Contra too. So they're just riding Contra's bandwagon. Yeah, I would have been super pumped if I was like, oh, these guys made Contra too?
Yeah, that gray-lined box. It's a symbol of quality. For me, Castlevania, Russian Attack. But, it's all the same, this gray framed Konami stuff. And that's like my favorite NES era box art style.
Yeah. Well, I love that Contra one, which just got the alien in the back. But
yeah, that's really good.
I mean, the Jackal one looks good too.
Jackal shot was photographed on an Amiga system, it says. That's interesting.
It does look better than ours.
Yeah.
They were totally trying to take advantage of us.
Yeah, they were.
We've even got the NES controller, and they're trying to show us an Amiga screenshot.
That's bullshit. The Contra one is system accurate.
Yeah. Well, Contra was the A-team.
Did you and I used to beat Contra? I used to beat that all the time.
We must have beat Contra. The question is, did we beat it without using the Konami code?
I think I could do that.
Yeah, but did we?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that. I got pretty good at that game for a while. I knew where all the cheap deaths were and I could avoid them.
I never really owned that game, so I never got that great at it. So I used to rent it sometimes. Like I said, I was a total sucker for that military Jeep, just that green desert Jeep in any form when I was a kid that age. Some part of me was just enjoying driving a Jeep around. And the rest of it wasn't so difficult that having to kill everything in my path really got in the way of just the general, whimsy of driving the Jeep around.
Yeah.
Enough that I could finish the game,
There's also just
and seeing the environments. And I do wish that, I really do wish that they stuck with what we saw with the statues shooting missiles at us. And I know it's kind of out of place for the rest of the game, and it kind of makes you wonder how they even got there. But I mean, that would have been cool if we kept getting weirder and weirder stuff, but we didn't. It just deteriorated into generic military targets.
So the graphics weren't as impressive in Commando for NES, but the movement seemed smoother and quicker.
Yeah, I mean, something about it seemed more enjoyable. But yeah, the graphics weren't great at all. Commando and Ikari Warriors were pretty early games in the life cycle, right?
Yeah. Commando has versions on Intellivision and Atari.
Something about this game did make me just remember how everything was just so, it was total just 80s military cheese, just propaganda pushed in your face.
Yep. I was just reading the manual. It's like,
yeah, no.
This is what we were weaned on.
It's kind of jarring to go back to that now.
Mhm.
But it's also kind of just enjoyable at the same time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like there's total nostalgia for it.
I
So
I completely agree that I think it could be jarring. It is a little jarring, but it's so nice to have the context
right.
and to just to see this for what it is. Just Jackal started so strong, only to fizzle out really quickly.
Yeah, it was not great. It was not great.
No, mediocre.
But there was something that was very playable about it. And like you said, it's inoffensive. But you're playing a game that's a contemporary for what most of the games that we played were when we were growing up.
A vanilla of
Right.
yeah, definitely.
Right. It looks like it was designed in the Metal Gear world, but they like farmed it out to their like D team to just, slapped up something together with assets they'd already used for other games.
Yeah, the map was just so unremarkable.
Yeah.
And it reminded me, yeah, it kind of had a similar color palette to the parts of the Metal Gear NES that I remember.
Which is just the beginning for me.
Yeah, I don't think I got too far. I always confused myself because I did play through the entirety of Metal Gear Solid on Game Boy Color. It had similar horsepower to the NES. So I always think, oh yeah, I played the 8-bit Metal Gear. I beat that, but no, I didn't.
2 a.m. on HBO. Never heard of this movie before, but you don't want to go to bed, so
Yep.
you're gonna watch this thing.
Oh, that's exactly nailed it. And you just find yourself you can't even describe it as sucked in to it. You just
It's the same way that I felt going through Jackal, to be honest.
yeah, yeah.
Jackal is like, B movie for a video game.
Mm-hmm.
It's that late night thing that, all right, there's nothing else on. This is the game I'm playing right now.
Yeah.
If you rented it from a store or whatever. Like you said, you get to the end of the level, you see how far you're up on the screen, you're like, there's not that much farther to go.
Yeah.
I'll keep playing. I'll keep pushing through this.
Yeah, if there was no map and I just didn't know how many more levels were in front of me, I'm not sure how long I would have kept going.
Yeah.
And the ending sucked.
The ending sucked, but to your point, it was a lot more of an ending than Karate Kid.
True. The helicopter coming at you.
They gave you a little bit of the Apocalypse Now scene.
Yeah, that's true.
And then, but then you get credits.
The sunset looks nice, I guess. Kind of like reminds me of Rygar.
Yeah, no, the sunset does look nice.
I mean, you see why that franchise didn't go anywhere after that.
After Jackal, the first one?
Yeah. I mean, Contra, many sequels, still going. Castlevania went for years. Gradius is still a thing.
They're still doing Gradius?
I think they did one just only a couple of years ago.
Yeah, Konami is great. I think this is, one of the worst Konami games I can think of having played, if not the worst.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think I'm going to say, and a lot of NES fans might disagree with me, I'm going to say I enjoyed it more than Bayou Billy.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have not played a game from them that is worse than this. And that's not, and to be honest, that's not a criticism, because this is, if this is the bottom of the barrel, considering all the titles that they've done,
yeah,
that's pretty good, because this is okay. Anyway, should we wrap up our thoughts on Jackal?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I don't have
a good analogy either. I really haven't thought about it. But if I was, I guess digging through the past, and there is definitely something here that is reflective of the past and gives me a sense of nostalgia playing this game. Kind of like going to just looking at like an old picture, I guess, or looking at like an old magazine. Not like you would go to a museum to see this piece up there, but when you're flipping through an old magazine, an old Nintendo Power, whatever you're looking at, and you see the ads of these games, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. And then you play it and you're like, oh yeah, that's about what I expect. Like that reminds me of the time period. It's about how good and uninspiring most games were. But I think that yeah, it's indicative of the time. So, if I was digging this out of the past, it's like finding a magazine or a cave drawing or an advertisement, a basic Coca-Cola ad from a newspaper article from 100 years ago that you're like, oh, that's kind of cool that it's there. But in reality, it's just a piece of propaganda from the time. And it's not a particularly good one or an inspiring one. It's just one that reminds you of a time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I also did get some value in it, knowing that it was, or feeling that it was such a basically a template, a generic game almost that represented its time. And it kind of, to me, it's not as fun as Commando or Akari Warriors, or even those flying auto scroller ones we were talking about. But it reminded me of all of those, from the splash screen to the sound effect when you press pause, all those touches. It can't be avoided that it's going to take you back in time, but then the context that the game gave me was for those other games I just mentioned. And it made me feel good to finally play through the game that I had seen in ads so often in middle school. So now it's funny you mentioned in your review, like an old magazine. It's funny because that's how I think of this game. I think of Jackal as an ad in my old Nintendo Fun Club magazine or Nintendo Power. So for that, yeah, I enjoyed that. Got my hopes up there at the beginning with the early boss fight with the statue heads. Kind of made me think it could do, whatever. The makers weren't going to be constrained by trying to make a realistic version of Vietnam. It could have had some supernatural elements, but they didn't take it in that direction, and that was disappointing. And it's also very forgettable. I'm already forgetting the different levels, and by next week I will have forgotten it. So that's not a bad thing. So if I were looking in the past, I would see this as it being generic again, but in a different way, in that you mentioned it's propaganda, and it so blatantly is. And so I just see this as a pretty generic piece of propaganda for the 80s. And so if I were reaching into the past, this would be no better. It would just be whatever the propaganda for whatever time period it would be. So, if it was from the 40s, it would be anti-German and Japanese propaganda specifically.